Rain lashed against the windshield in a steady rhythm, each drop tapping like a nervous heartbeat. Eliza tightened her grip on the steering wheel, squinting through the blur of storm and shadow as her truck rumbled down the muddy auction road. She was late, again, and the auctioneer hated late bidders. But it wasn't the auctioneer she cared about. It was the horse. She'd seen the photo online that morning. Poor resolution, grainy, barely more than a silhouette. But the eyes. The horse's eyes were what made her heart seize. Wild, terrified, sunken deep into a skull far too prominent for comfort. Someone had left him to rot. And yet, he was still standing. The truck slid to a stop beside the makeshift paddock. Eliza stepped out, her boots instantly swallowed by cold mud. The heavy air smelled of wet hay and resignation. People were already leaving. Hats pulled low, jackets pulled tighter. From the speakers, the auctioneer's voice boomed, bored, flat, final. Lot 58. Unbroken. Unrideable. Dangerous. We'll start the bidding at $10. Anyone? A few mutters. Laughter. Someone spat near the gate. Eliza's eyes scanned the pen until she saw him. He was a ghost of a horse, gray, with patches of white where scars had erased the fur. His ribs jutted like broken piano keys, and one ear was half torn. He stood still, too still, as if he'd already given up on whatever came next. His eyes didn't flinch when the auctioneer's gavel struck the post. Sold. $20. To the lady in the brown coat. Eliza nodded without speaking. $20. She wasn't even sure she had that much in her account after buying gas. But it didn't matter. She didn't come here to bargain. She came because something inside her wouldn't let her stay away. As she approached the pen, the gatekeeper gave her a warning glance. You know what you're getting into, right? That one's bad news. Took out a handler last week. No fear, no trust. I'm not here for a pet, she said softly. I'm here for him. The man shrugged and unlatched the gate. Eliza stepped inside, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure the horse could hear it. The other horses backed away or shifted, but this one remained rooted to the ground like a stone monument. She stopped a few feet away, lowering her gaze. I'm not going to hurt you, she whispered. I don't want anything from you. For a moment, there was nothing. Then he flicked his tail. A small movement, barely noticeable. But to her, it was a beginning. It took 15 minutes to get him loaded. He didn't fight, but he didn't follow either. Eliza used her body, her silence, her patience. He stumbled once getting into the trailer and nearly fell. She reached out instinctively, but stopped short, remembering what the gatekeeper had said. Instead, she waited. Eventually, with a low grunt, he gathered himself and stepped inside. The trailer door slammed shut behind them with a heavy thud. She slid into the truck, soaked to the bone, and turned the key. The engine coughed, then came alive. In the rearview mirror, she could barely see his outline in the dim light. But he was there. That was enough. The drive home was quiet. No music. No distractions. Only the sound of tires pushing through water and the occasional thump from the trailer. She didn't name him. Not yet. Names were earned. Eliza lived on the edge of town, past the overgrown fields and empty barns. Her small ranch was more of a sanctuary than a business, a place for the forgotten, the failed, the fearful. Over the years, she had taken in horses too damaged to be useful, given them space, time, and her presence. Some healed, some didn't, but all were seen. That was her promise. By the time she backed the trailer into the paddock, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. She opened the gate and waited. Minutes passed. No movement. Eliza didn't coax him. She sat on the wet ground just outside the trailer, breathing deeply, letting the stillness wrap around them like a blanket. The world was quiet except for the soft rustle of wind through the trees. Then she heard it. A single hoof step. Then another. He emerged slowly, each limb stiff like a rusted hinge. His coat shone faintly in the moonlight, now more silver than gray. He blinked at her, nostrils wide, breath steaming in the cool air. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. He looked at her, truly looked, and in that moment, something passed between them. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. Two fractured souls, drawn to each other not by need, but by knowing. The next morning, she stood by the stable gate with a pail of feed. The others had already come, but not him. He lingered in the far corner of the field, motionless, watching. He needs time, she told herself. So do you. Eliza hadn't always been this person. There was a time, not long ago, when she had dreams beyond this ranch. Vet school, big city clinics, a life with structure and acclaim. Then her mother's illness happened. The care took everything, time, money, spirit. When her mother passed, Eliza left the program, sold what little she had, and came back to the one thing that had ever made sense: horses. She knew pain, knew what it meant to be unfixable in the eyes of others. That's why she couldn't leave the horse behind. She watched him from the kitchen window that afternoon. He hadn't moved much. Occasionally, his head would jerk at a noise, muscles tense like pulled wire. His scars ran deeper than flesh. Whatever had happened to him had left invisible wounds. That evening, she sat by his paddock again, reading aloud from a book. Her voice was soft, steady. Not for him, not really. For herself. But he didn't turn away. On the third night, he crept closer. Still not near, but not distant. Close enough to hear her breathing. When she coughed, he flinched. When she laughed quietly, he blinked, confused. Curiosity flickered through the cracks of his fear. On the fifth morning, she found him standing outside the stable, waiting. That was when she gave him a name. Ghost, she said, placing a gentle hand on the railing. Because you're not all the way here yet. He didn't react, but he didn't retreat either. And that, for Eliza, was enough. She knew this was the start of something uncertain, something fragile. But as Ghost stood beneath the gray sky, the wind stirring his tangled mane, she felt, for the first time in years, like something inside her had shifted. He had come to her broken, but maybe he wasn't the only one waiting to be saved. Morning mist hung low over the ranch like a veil, softening the hard lines of broken fences and overgrown pastures. Ghost stood at the far end of the field, his thin frame barely visible through the haze. Eliza leaned on the fence rail, coffee cooling in her hand, eyes fixed on him. He was still not letting her close. Not really. Every time she took a step toward him, he would stiffen, shift his weight, sometimes pin his ears back, just slightly, warning enough. She respected that. Trust wasn't owed. It was earned, moment by moment, breath by breath. But small signs had begun to appear. He no longer flinched at her voice. He didn't bolt when the barn door creaked open. He started watching her from the corner of his eye, even if he didn't come near. She read his silences like a language, one of survival and slow, reluctant hope. That morning, she decided to move the training halter closer. Not to use it, just to place it in sight, coiled neatly on the fence. Ghost glanced at it once, snorted quietly, then looked away. "Eliza!" A voice called behind her. It was Jonah, her neighbor and oldest friend. He held a bag of feed over one shoulder and wore his usual scowl, softened by concern. "You really gonna keep working with that one?" She nodded without turning. "You know what people are saying, right?" Jonah continued. "That you're wasting time. That he's too far gone." She finally looked at him. "People said that about me once, too." Jonah's face shifted. Guilt flickered there, but he didn't argue. He set the feed down and leaned beside her. "What's the plan?" he asked. "No plan," she said quietly. "Just time. Presence." He gave a short laugh. "Well, I hope you've got plenty of both." Later that day, she filled a bucket with warm ash and brought it to the center of the paddock. Instead of placing it by the fence like before, she sat beside it, legs folded beneath her, arms resting loosely over her knees. She didn't speak, just existed. Minutes passed. A crow cawed in the distance. The wind stirred the trees. And then, hoof steps, slow, deliberate, uncertain. Ghost approached, stopping several feet away. His eyes darted to the bucket, then to her. Back and forth. She kept her eyes on the grass. More silence. Then, softly, tentatively, he stepped closer. His muzzle hovered just above the mash. He waited, as if expecting a trap. Eliza remained still. When he finally dipped his head and took the first bite, Her throat tightened. It was the first time he'd chosen to eat in her presence. After a few minutes, he retreated again, returning to the far corner. But the boundary had shifted. A line had been crossed, not with force, but with patience. That night, the rain returned. Not a storm like before, but a steady, soaking drizzle. Eliza lay awake, listening to it tap against the roof, mind spinning. She kept seeing his eyes, those haunted, hollow eyes, and wondering what he'd been through, who had hurt him, what he'd survived. Sleep didn't come easy. At dawn, she found him shivering by the gate, soaked and trembling. He hadn't taken shelter in the open stable. Maybe he didn't know he was allowed. Eliza moved slowly, grabbing a blanket from the tack room. Ghost didn't run when she approached this time. He watched her, eyes wide but unblinking. "I'm just going to help," she whispered. The first touch was like a spark. His skin twitched under her fingers, but he didn't bolt. She draped the blanket over his back gently, careful not to startle him. His breathing was fast, erratic, but he stayed. For the first time, he allowed her to make contact, even if only for a moment. "Good boy," she murmured. She spent the next week repeating that same rhythm, showing up, being still, offering without asking. Each day, he allowed a little more. He sniffed her sleeve. He let her brush mud from his legs. One evening, he even let her touch the side of his face, where a long scar ran beneath his eye. It was during these moments that she began to speak to him, not with commands or praise, but with stories. "I used to dream about being a vet," she told him, brushing his flank. "But life, well, it had other plans." Ghost listened with those deep, ancient eyes, not understanding the words, but hearing the weight in them. "You know," she said once, "I lost someone. I never really said goodbye." She didn't say her mother's name. Didn't have to. The pain lingered in the pause. Another week passed. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the ranch in gold, she decided to try something new. The halter. She brought it out again, this time in her hand. Ghost stiffened but didn't back away. "It's just fabric," she said softly. "Not a trap. Not a cage." She let him sniff it, then set it down, then picked it up again. The next day, she held it out to him. He touched it with his nose. She didn't rush. By the third evening, after long moments of stillness and breath, he let her slip it over his head. Tears burned her eyes as she tightened the strap. It wasn't about control. It was about trust. That night, Jonah dropped by again, leaning against the post. "You really did it," he said. "No," she corrected. "He did." Jonah whistled low. "So what now?" "Now we walk," Eliza said. And they did. In the fading light, she led Ghost around the paddock, one careful step at a time. He followed, not like a trained horse, not with ease, but he followed. The wind picked up slightly, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers from beyond the ridge. Ghost stopped suddenly, ears pricked toward the open fields. Something stirred in him, an instinct, a memory, a calling. Eliza watched him closely. "You'll run again someday," she said, more to herself than to him. But Ghost didn't run yet. Not tonight. He stayed by her side. The frost arrived overnight, spreading across the pastures in a silver web that glittered beneath the early morning sun. Eliza stepped outside, breath misting in the chilled air. The ranch was still, quiet in a way that felt almost sacred. She pulled her jacket tighter and walked toward the paddock, the crunch of frozen grass underfoot the only sound. Ghost stood at the gate waiting for her, the halter already on his head. She hadn't put it there. He'd started allowing Jonah to help now and then, but it still took her by surprise. He nickered softly when he saw her, a low, broken sound like the wind slipping through a crack in the door. "You ready?" she asked. They had been walking together for weeks now. The routine had become familiar, slow loops around the ranch, building confidence with each step. Ghost no longer flinched at birds in the trees or distant tractors on the road. He still startled at sudden movements, but his panic faded quicker. He stayed close. Today, though, would be different. Today, she planned to open the gate, not to release him into the wild. He wouldn't survive yet, but to let him feel space again. Real space. Movement. Wind against his face, without barriers. It was the next test, for both of them. She led him to the edge of the wide, open field behind the barn, a place untouched by hooves in years, grown thick with wild grass and rimmed by trees. She paused at the gate, heart racing. "You don't have to go far," she whispered, more to ease her own nerves. "Just feel it." With steady hands, she unlatched the gate and stepped aside. Ghost didn't bolt. He didn't even move at first. His head lifted, ears twitching forward. The field lay before him like a forgotten promise. He sniffed the wind. Then, cautiously, he stepped through. One stride, then another. He didn't gallop, didn't rear or snort or explode into motion like Eliza had imagined. Instead, he walked. Slow, thoughtful, as if each footfall was rewriting a memory he'd carried too long. Eliza followed at a distance, careful not to crowd him. The wind picked up, brushing his mane aside. His body looked stronger now, more filled out. The lines of pain had softened, replaced by something quieter, deeper, acceptance. She called softly, "Ghost." He turned, met her eyes, then looked beyond her to the horizon. There was a flicker in his gaze, not fear, but longing. "Go on," she said. And he did. Not far, not fast. But he moved with purpose, circling the field, nostrils flaring, tail flicking. For a brief moment, he broke into a trot, ungraceful, uneven, but real. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. He was reclaiming himself, one step at a time. As the sun climbed higher, he returned to her, sweat darkening the fur around his shoulders. She touched his face gently. He didn't pull away. "Well done," she whispered. That afternoon, Jonah came by with a small trailer and a question. "You sure you want to do this?" Eliza looked down at the flyer in her hand. A local rescue showcase was being held at the county fairgrounds, a place where rehabilitated animals were brought to show progress, meet adopters, raise awareness. She nodded. "He needs to be seen." Jonah raised an eyebrow. "Seen or tested?" "Both," she replied. They loaded Ghost with little trouble. He was nervous, but not resistant. Eliza stayed with him the entire ride, talking softly, hand resting against the slats. He leaned into her touch for comfort. The fairgrounds were buzzing when they arrived, children with sticky hands, dogs barking, horses whinnying from distant stalls. Ghost stiffened the moment the trailer door opened. His body tensed, eyes wide, breath shallow. "It's okay," she said, stepping down first. "You're not alone." She led him into the ring slowly. The crowd quieted. Murmurs rippled through the space. People stared, some with curiosity, others with doubt. There were prettier horses there, glossy coats, perfect posture, groomed manies. But Ghost wasn't there to impress. He was there to exist, to be proof of survival. Eliza walked him around the pen once, then twice. She stopped. He stopped. She backed. He backed. The connection between them was clear, unspoken, fragile, real. A man in a suit approached the railing. "Is he available for adoption?" he asked. "No," she replied without hesitation. The man frowned. "Then why bring him?" She met his gaze. "Because people need to understand that value isn't measured by beauty or obedience. Sometimes it's about resilience." The man said nothing more. He moved on. Later, a young girl approached shyly. Her left leg was in a brace. She didn't speak, just stared at Ghost. Eliza lowered the lead rope slightly, giving Ghost room. The girl extended a hand. Ghost sniffed her fingers gently. Then, to everyone's surprise, he lowered his head and rested it lightly against her shoulder. Tears welled up in Eliza's eyes. She looked at Jonah, who stood at a distance, arms crossed tightly. He nodded once. When they returned home that evening, Eliza released Ghost back into the field. He walked calmly now, no hesitation. The sky had turned pink at the edges. A heron flew overhead. She leaned on the fence, watching him graze. "He chose you, you know," Jonah said behind her. Eliza didn't turn. "Maybe we chose each other." Jonah chuckled. "Maybe you're both just too stubborn to quit." They stood in silence for a while, the evening cooling around them. Ghost raised his head and looked toward them. There was something unspoken in his eyes, a calmness, a quiet strength. Eliza smiled faintly. She had rescued a broken horse, but in truth, It was never just about saving him. It was about healing together. The wind howled across the ridgeline, scattering dry leaves over the paddock and tugging at the corners of the old tarp nailed above the feed room. Winter was settling in, slow and steady, laying claim to the hills with its breath of frost. Eliza moved through the morning ritual like muscle memory. Check water, feed, hay nets. But her mind was elsewhere. Ghost had been distant the past few days. Not fearful, just distracted, restless in a way she hadn't seen before. She spotted him standing by the north fence, eyes fixed on something beyond the ranch. He didn't move when she called, didn't turn his head. It wasn't defiance. It was longing. She approached quietly, heart heavy with recognition. He wasn't broken anymore. He was healing. And with healing came instinct, an old memory of movement, of herds, of space without fences. Her hand found his mane. You see something out there? He didn't flinch. His body had grown stronger, broader. Scars still marked his skin, but they no longer defined him. She had poured months into his recovery, fed him, walked with him, spoken to him when no one else believed he was listening. And now he was ready. That truth cut deep. Jonah arrived just afternoon, slamming his truck door with the usual impatience. You heard about the roundup? Eliza turned. Where? North Ridge. Couple miles off. Someone saw a band of wild Mustangs passing through. Think they might get pushed toward the back valley if they spook. Ghost lifted his head at Jonah's voice. His ears pricked forward, alert. Eliza's stomach twisted. They'll run them toward the cliffs. Yeah, Jonah said. Unless someone rides ahead and blocks him. You thinking what I'm thinking? She looked at Ghost, who was already stepping toward her. I don't think he's just ready, she said softly. I think he needs this. Jonah hesitated. He's never been ridden, Eliza. Maybe not, she replied, but I trust him. They saddled up in silence. Eliza's hands were steady despite the weight of the moment. Ghost stood calmly as she slipped the pad and saddle onto his back. No buck, no shift. Just a quiet glance back at her, as if saying, I know. The moment her boots slid into the stirrup, Jonah stopped breathing. So did she. Then she swung her leg over. Ghost trembled slightly beneath her, but didn't move. She sat gently, body loose, heartbeat thunderous. She waited. And then he stepped forward. The ride was rough, unsure. His gait was uneven at first, head tossing from time to time. But Eliza let him find a rhythm. She didn't force it. She gave him the reins, the trust. He responded with cautious acceptance, like an old warrior remembering a dance. The ridge came fast. Dust curled behind them as they climbed. Jonah followed close on his own mare, calling directions over the wind. There, below, a dozen wild horses moved like a flowing river across the valley floor. Lean fast, afraid. At the back, a foal lagged behind, its tiny legs struggling to keep up. They're headed straight for the bluffs. Jonah yelled. Eliza leaned low, whispering into Ghost's ear. Let's go. And he went. Down the hill they charged, the earth trembling beneath his hooves. Gone was the hesitant, wounded animal from months before. In his place rode a creature born of muscle and memory, of instinct reclaimed. They surged toward the front of the herd, Eliza guiding with only her knees and voice. She didn't pull. She didn't demand. She simply rode beside him, letting him choose the path. He did not fail her. Ghost moved to the side of the lead mare, cutting her path just enough to angle the herd. A ripple of confusion passed through the group, then adjustment. The whole formation shifted, veering away from the cliffs. Jonah whooped from behind. You did it. Eliza barely heard. Her eyes were on the foal. It had stumbled, fallen. The rest of the herd was already curving away. Without hesitation, Ghost turned on his own. Eliza clung tight as he galloped toward the downed baby, sliding to a stop just beside it. She leapt from the saddle, mud splashing up her legs. The foal was panting, legs scraped, its eyes wide with terror. Eliza knelt beside it, hands soothing but firm. You're okay, she whispered. You're not alone. Ghost hovered nearby, ears alert, head low. The foal looked at him, some primal recognition flickering there, safety. Eliza stood slowly and backed away. Ghost stepped forward. The foal pushed itself up, limbs shaking. Ghost nudged its side gently, and it moved, stumbling at first, but forward. They returned together, Ghost walking beside the foal like a sentinel. Eliza followed, overwhelmed, unable to speak. Back at the ranch, as twilight melted into night, Eliza unsaddled Ghost beneath the stars. The foal had been taken in by a sanctuary team, safe, fed, warm. Jonah had gone home already, promising to return with fencing help in the morning. Ghost stood still, body steaming, but calm. Eliza rested her forehead against his. "You saved them." He exhaled softly, a sound of release. She knew, now more than ever, that Ghost wasn't hers to keep. He had more to do, somewhere beyond this ranch. But she also knew he would never really be gone. Not from her. Not from the story they had written together. As she opened the gate to the outer pasture, Ghost walked through without hesitation, mane lifting in the breeze. He stopped once, halfway up the hill, and turned. Their eyes met across the dusk. No words, just understanding. Then he disappeared into the night,